so glad to have you back for another week of Evolve. I am your host, Monette Brann-Natta. I am so happy to share some energy with you this week. What a weekend it's been. What a week it's been. What a time of change it has been. This week, we all watched millions of women, men and children all over the world take to the streets in protest in the loss of their rights, or the perceived loss of those rights at that time, rights that were hard-earned and fought for. That movement swept the world and was started by a retired Hawaiian lawyer. She sent out a message and woke up on her Facebook to 10,000 responses. And it is in this way that we all can change the world. We often hear that said, one person can change the world. But this weekend, we watched it happen. My guest today has adopted the same ideology. By using her voice, she shifted ideas and affected her world. She also happens to be from Hawaii, so I think there must be something in the water there. What would you do if you were tasked with speaking for a force of nature? What if all the little moments in your life added up to this one great thing? A thing you didn't ask for or even expect, but your ancestors or Amakua had prepared you nonetheless. What would you do? Would you speak truth to the seemingly powerful, or would you speak your truth as a protector of one of the greatest powers on earth? My guest today has always known that she's had an extra sense. She's always been in tune with the natural rhythms of life. As a native Hawaiian, Ihilani grew up in a majestic island with elders who taught her to revere the land and its people. Even her name, Ihilani, means reverence from heaven. Ihilani has always wanted to save the world and began that quest by becoming a foster parent at 19 years old, following it up by counseling the pregnant teen in her town of Paoa. As a fluent speaker of the almost lost Hawaiian language, Ihilani manifested positions as a language immersion teacher's aide for the Department of Education. She imparted her island's beautiful language into the young people that she adores there. And this is why we should not be surprised that her lifelong work as an advocate has culminated into a moment that launched her into the media spotlight. Ihilani found herself in the unique position of tapping into the strength of her name and teaching politicians and bureaucrats about having reverence for our earth. She stands in the gap for her children. She stands in the gap for her traditions. She stands in the gap for her land and the ancient art of all things Hawaiian. And it is in this way that Ihilani pays true homage to her namesake by existing in a state of reverence. I am so grateful to have you with us today, Ihilani. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, and giving me this opportunity to share with you. I really, really appreciative of this.
You are so welcome, and it's an honor. And I want to just let all of the listeners know right away, Ihilani deserves like all of your hats off, all of your likes and listens, because she is calling in from the big island of Hawaii, and it is, 6 a.m. there at this time?
Yes, it is.
This hour.
6 a.m.
Amazing,
Yes.
guys. She's my hero already for the day because she's up at this hour and functioning so beautifully. But one of the things that I'm always trying to convey is that we're always being communicated with. We're always receiving messages from God or universe or source, however you frame it. And I mentioned in your intro that you've always had an extra sense. Can you tell the listeners what that feels like for you to hear and how you experience that?
I knew from a young age. I know that the older I get, the more I realize this. What it feels like is the best way to describe this is you there is a difference between hearing and listening. You hear with your ears, but you listen with every sense of you, all of our senses. You listen with your guts, I like to say. I listen with my heart. I listen with everything in me. And that's, that's the difference. And then you got to use all your senses. So that's what it feels like to me to tap into that sense. And we all have it, It's just, and it's time and place. You if you want to hear it and listen to it, you will.
You will. And I know in your culture as well that there is a lot of grooming done by elders and mentors, a lot of respect still paid to that tradition of being groomed. I would imagine that they're teaching too how to listen with spirit and not just with your ears.
They do. I think, and now, they lead by example. And so because our elders are such a big part of our life, they edify through their actions. So just by watching continuously, and because culturally we live together, it's not, it is very common for us to have grandparents in the house.
Right.
Yeah. So, yes, they constantly groom us and teach us. And like I said, they edify or teach just through action, and through everyday things. So, yes.
So they're in that way they're learning. And I think that's something that kind of is missing in American culture. There's still the institution of our grandparents and our aunts and elders and people that teach us things. But I do notice, being from a West Indian culture, even though I was born here and all of that, I do notice that parents are more revered. There is this kind of respect your elders thing that seems to happen outside a lot of America. Outside, it seems like it happens. It's more pervasive. This kind of, if you look at the Chinese as well, you're living with many generations are living in one home. And so in that way, this wisdom is constantly being passed down.
Oh, definitely. It pays it really, you can see the difference in the children and how they grow up.
Right.
So, yes.
Yeah. And when I was mentioning some of your bio as we were getting into the intro of the show, and you have lived a pretty extraordinary life. And I was talking about that foster parent at 19. I was just like gobsmacked, like, wow, you decided to take on children and you were still essentially a teenager yourself. What made you want to do that?
At 19, I think a lot of us, we have that fire in us. It's a part of being naive, and it's this, I just want, as soon as I bought my house, I was a teen mom.
Okay.
So as soon as I bought my house, I thought, that, these roles that you play kind of find you. So there were, it's hard to explain why I wanted to do that. I just knew. And so my husband at the time and I went to the classes and we became licensed foster parents. That was short-lived, I will say, because you quickly learn at 19 it is very difficult to raise a 13-year-old and have them respect you or look at you as a mother figure.
Right. So that was kind of an interesting lesson, a harder moment. And I think that sometimes hard times really shape us all, and they help us to decide who we want to be. Can you tell us, besides that time when you figured out foster parenting, yes, but maybe no, can you tell us about any times that kind of helped to shape you to become the advocate that you did? Now, you did mention that you had your own children, and so you're moving through this too. What made you want to get involved and help?
I was, as a child, I survived molestation, and I had a very supportive family. And, in high school, one of my girlfriends had showed me that she didn't have that support. And her mom didn't believe her. And that broke my heart. And I think it's that moment that I said, I want to help. And always wanted to be a teacher. I just had that nature, and I gravitated, and people wanted to learn from me at a young age. And, you know, you don't question, you just kind of do. You go through the motions, and I wanted to work with children. So, you know, I don't think the last job that I had, I'm a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker now, but the last title that I held was Teenage Pregnancy Prevention Coordinator, and that was doing outreach work in my community. And I don't think I found that job. In fact, I shouldn't say the word think. I know I didn't find that job. That calling found me. So I couldn't hide from it. No matter where I went, it gravitates. It's like this magnet, and the job finds you.
And that job is a job for an emotional giant, because I think you're dealing with all of these very turbulent feelings that teens are having, and wondering about their life and wondering what direction and if they're good or bad people, especially as juxtaposed to them from society in their position. I can't imagine how taxing that must have been on you spiritually.
Well, these experiences, I don't even want to call it a job, because you don't leave the job. The job follows you home. And what this particular experience taught me was that I didn't know how to set boundaries. I wanted to save the world. I wanted to save every child that walked in my office, and I even looked for other children to save. You know, and it's not saving, but just guiding them and nurturing and letting them know that somebody's here. What it taught me was I didn't know boundaries, and boundaries are healthy. And so because I did not have boundaries, and it caused me to have a nervous breakdown, because what happened to me is it's like a sponge. I could not wring out my sponge fast enough to take on more water, and a sponge becomes,
saturated.
Useless.
Yeah,
it becomes saturated, and then I became overwhelmed. And because I am a diabetic, we already understand, most of the world, that diabetes and stress go hand in hand. So not only did I have the nervous breakdown, but physically my body started to break down. So yeah, it was very spiritually taxing, and that became a domino effect.
Right. I want to take a moment and just first thank you for your vulnerability and sharing the things that happened to you in your childhood, because I think there's so many women, men out there, children even, that may be listening or know someone that have experienced this. And so I think that we need to pay respects to that and believe the person. If there's someone that's coming to you and saying something's going on, trust what you're hearing. Listen to your gut. Listen with your body, like Ihilani just described, and really know what's happening and believe it. So I think that's such an important thing. And I also wanted to stop you there for a moment, Ihilani, because the time frame you gave, you said you had this, and when we were talking, you said it was about 28 or 29. And to me, this correlates with your first Saturn return. And I've touched on this a little bit on the show, but the Saturn return is this universal coming of age moment. And if we're lucky, we get 3 of them I've mentioned. But the first one happens about 28 to 30. And it affects us, and the effects can be felt until about 32. So I do not think that it was a coincidence that you became very introspective at that time, and that your body in conjunction began to kind of break down, because this is a big part of the reason that the Saturn return occurs, is to move you firmly into adulthood that feels right to you. Now, before that, we're kind of taking on a lot of identities. You know what I mean? We're what our family says we should be, and what our friends think we are, and what our boyfriends or girlfriends think we are. And when we hit about 30, there's this real coming of age. So you take time to reassess, and you begin to move forward with your life. And you mentioned that you felt like your akapuna were with you in many ways. And in this time, you even had a visitation with your grandmother. And I want to make sure I got the time frame right. Can you explain what that word akapuna means, and about the very powerful message that you were given?
Oh, okay. So kupuna means grandparent. And